Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Environmental Justice Now. My name is Faith Harris, and I am the co-director for Virginia Interfaith Power and Light. Thank you for tuning in to another episode. Today's episode is the final in our Juneteenth series, and we have been exploring environmental justice through the lens of liberation and freedom, and Juneteenth has served as a frame for our conversation this month. We have highlighted the connections in various ways in which the environment has historically been exploited and employed to oppress Black communities and rural communities. During our shows this month, we have covered energy burden, public transit inequity, and last week we had an eye-opening episode discussing water accessibility and affordability as a form of oppression. If you missed any of the previous shows, please check out our Facebook page to view the recorded videos. Today, our series is closing with a conversation about the ways in which landfill expansion and siting has contributed to oppression of rural Black communities and how this landfill expansion is currently affecting multiple communities and families in Cumberland and Powhatan counties. To explore this topic, we have the pleasure of talking to a powerhouse, Muriel Branch of AMMD. Let me share a little bit about the proposed construction of a landfill in Cumberland County that now threatens the Pine Grove Elementary School. According to the Green Ridge Recycling and Disposal Facility, the landfill intends to accept up to 5,000 tons of waste daily and operate 24 hours a day, 6 days per week. Moreover, the disposal unit will be located within 1,000 feet of Pine Grove Elementary School. Advocates believe that the proposed landfill could negatively impact their goal of using the school as a community center and will completely disrupt their way of life. Muriel, our guest today, is the passionate founder and president of AMMD Pine Grove Project. She is born in New Jersey, but her family moved when she was 3 years old to her father's home in the Pine Grove community of Cumberland County, Virginia. She grew up in a God-centered home where love abounded. Therefore, love has been the guiding force in her life. Muriel has an amazing list of accomplishments, including multiple degrees, accolades as an author, and serving as an associate minister of Good Shepherd Baptist Church in Richmond. She is a mother, a grandmother, and an ordained minister, retired educator, activist, and author. And although she has earned her right to relax and let others do the heavy lifting, she is still in the fight for equity. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today, Muriel. We are excited you agreed to join our series.
Thank you, Faith. It's a pleasure to be with you and to share the Pine Grove story.
Yeah, so let's jump in to our conversation. So Muriel, tell us what the acronym AMMD stands for and how the organization came to be.
The acronym AMMD Pine Grove, AMMD stands for family name. A.G. Miller Mayo Dungy. Our family has been organized loosely since 1975. And the purpose was for to plan family reunions. However, in 2018, we discovered that the school was going to be auctioned for delinquent taxes. And that's when we jumped into the fight to preserve to save, rescue, and preserve the school.
Wow, that's really exciting for a family that was, just kind of trying to make sure family ties were strengthened, to recognize that not only did you come together for that purpose, but that you came together for an even more important and higher purpose. So tell us about Pine Grove, the Pine Grove School, and tell us about the history of the community. Why was it important to save this school or rescue it?
The history of Pine Grove community began during the Nadir in American history, when the Black laws were being instituted.
Mhm.
And families in that community, Black families in that community, began to purchase land, sometimes from their family's former enslavers, and began to build communities. Some of the first communities in the larger Pine Grove area were built like 1867, 1868, 1905. So we were building community during a time when the state of Virginia was codifying our second, citizenship into legislation. But that did not stop our families. This AMMD Pine Grove, AMMD family is just one of many who built this community. The school, the community members petitioned the county, Cumberland County, in 1916 to build a school for their children. It was built in 1917 and received its first students the fall of 1917. And it was built in partnership with the Rosenwald Fund. Community members, a husband and wife, gave the 4 acres of land, because a part of that partnership was that communities had to give something. It was not a handout, nor did they want a handout. They just wanted the opportunity. So the Black community raised $500. $500 came from taxes, which they also contributed to, and $50 came from the Rosenwald Fund. Like I said, the 4 acres of land were donated by William and Olivia Miller. So from the very beginning, the Black community saw the value of ownership, of educating their children.
Yeah, that's really important to recognize the contribution from the very beginning of the Black community itself. Oftentimes, when people think of these communities, they think in somehow that they were giveaways or they were handouts in the first place. So therefore, there's some suspect about the claims that are being made about, their people's historic right to be on that land. But I think what AMMD and what you're doing is, fixing that record, correcting that record, helping people to understand that African American freed people were working hard to first of all to create a life for themselves, create community, but also that they recognize the importance of education and economic development, and so that they've been working on and towards this from the very beginnings of emancipation. And so it's just so perfect that we're having this conversation in the month where we're celebrating Juneteenth as a national holiday for the first time. And I just so appreciate the history and the beauty of that history that you've shared with us. And so I also, wanted to have you on to have this conversation because I read your op-ed that you wrote a couple of, I guess it was last month or maybe it was late April. But I asked you, I called you or emailed you right away and said, oh, I'd love for you to come and talk about your op-ed a little bit more. And so I'd love to hear what prompted you to write that op-ed and what do you want us to know from that op-ed?
The CEO of Green Ridge wrote himself an op-ed in the Farmville Herald, and he really.
Well, Muriel, excuse me. First, tell us who that is.
Jerry Seafar is the CEO of Green Ridge Recycling and Disposal. Jerry wrote an article in the Farmville Herald, which essentially said that we my community hijacked the environmental justice conversation. And I sent it to members of AMMD Pine Grove Project, but particularly my family members. We're about 500 strong. Mm. And so they were absolutely livid. So we did a little strategizing to see how we could best respond and rebut that claim. And that is, of course, I was chosen to do that work. And what I wanted Jerry and every other person, ill-informed person, to know is that my people built that community. We built churches and homes, and we had farms, and we thrived. We had our own little businesses, sawmills and dairy farms and restaurants, and we had that community. We built it. Mm-hmm. And not only did we build it during after Reconstruction, but during Reconstruction, we built it during enslavement. Mm-hmm. So don't you dare come for us, saying that we don't understand environmental justice or injustice, I'd rather call it. Yes, I had to let the reading public know that he was completely off base. He was ill-informed, and I wanted them to know that the reason the statistical data, the demographic data reflects one thing, but does not reflect the formation of our community, was because of Jim Crow. Yeah. It was because of Black codes. It was because our families' tobacco allotments were different from those of our white neighbors. It was because we could not get an education beyond high school there. And for some of our older relatives, beyond elementary school. So it was not just a rebuttal to him, but prayerfully it elevated our story, the story of how Black communities and Indigenous communities were built, how our land was taken because we could not afford taxes, or we had to work away from home in order to make a living for our families. So there were so many things that the cumulative effects of Jim Crow caused our community to look like it looks today.
Yeah. I appreciate so much what you just shared with us and the way that you shared it with us. The reality is that so many people have in mind when they drive through communities around the state of Virginia, and it's not just Black communities, but Indigenous communities and even rural white communities,
Yeah.
not knowing their history, not knowing what it took for those communities, those families to build those schools and to build those community centers and churches, and what that meant for the cohesiveness, and what that meant for their values, and what that meant for their ability to thrive. And I think this is just such a beautiful story, and it's repeated so many times across the state, recognizing that there were so many barriers and reasons and policies and things to keep Black and poor communities from actually accomplishing their goals and enjoying, that the sense of freedom and the realities of freedom. And so your story just highlights, Pine Grove story highlights how critically important it is for us to cherish that history, not only to know it and unearth it and to seek it out, but also to cherish it and to help educate not just those community members that may have moved away or may be surrounded and not even know their own story, may still live near the community and still not know the story, but to help the rest of the county and the rest of the state understand that Virginia has rich history, not only not only the Confederacy, not only all of the other things that we so often see highlighted in this state, but also the stories of small communities fighting and working hard to make themselves a place that they can call home. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. Tell us a little bit more about how this landfill will affect the community. Can you share more about how you see landfill expansion and siting being used, or not being used, but as a form of oppression historically?
Absolutely. Number one, the sightings of these landfills are not arbitrary because we see too much of it. If it was arbitrary, they would not choose to cite these toxic industries in poor, underserved, Black, Indigenous communities, where they know that, first of all, most of the community leaders, the administration in these communities are strapped for funds.
Mm-hmm.
They need the revenue. So that is the first divisive technique they use. Then they come in and they offer landowners deals. And then, it's secret. Then you can't speak once you accept the deal.
Mm-hmm.
Once you accept the money, you lose your voice. Then they come in with these slick presentations that wow people into thinking that, oh, this is great. Another barrier is having the boards of supervisors and all listen to the residents. We understand that we're a poor county. We understand that. But it seems to us that there are other clean industries that would employ the same number of people, and perhaps over a longer term. We don't have a full service grocery store. We don't have a full service drugstore. There's so many things that we don't have that would hire people, employ people, and would be long-term. The landfill is a sugar high. That money is nothing but a sugar high. And there's no guarantee in talking with members of other communities like ours that any of those promises will be kept. The landfill is adjacent to a historic landmark. The landfill, Greenridge, would like to reroute a corridor, a road, a centuries-old road, Pine Grove, which goes right past Pine Grove School, in order to accommodate their trucks, their garbage trucks. And we know all too well how roads have been used to divide communities, cut off access to communities. Yes. And what it would do for us would be make it more difficult for us to use that space, that historic space, as a gathering place. The water would be affected. Everybody in that county, except for those right at the courthouse, have well water. So we're looking at the quality of water. We're looking at the quality of air quality. We're looking at the quality of life for those who live in the community. The odors, the rodents, all of these other things that come into play with the landfill. And all we want, we're not against anything. We are for keeping our community safe and healthy and keeping the historic integrity of our community. And so don't get it twisted. We're not out here fighting you just because. We're fighting you because our lives are at stake. Mm-hmm. And we care more about that than we do the revenue right now.
I so appreciate the way that you framed that. And I just want to highlight again some of the negative effects that you just read to us, or that you just spoke to us. That the landfill will break up communities, that these kinds of projects end up breaking up the communities because of things like the roads being changed and rerouted. It locks people out of the opportunity to enjoy green space. Who would want to have a picnic or have a family gathering next to a landfill and with the toxic fumes and smells and odors that come from that? not only does it contribute to global warming with the emissions of methane gas, because as the piles of waste rot and degrade, it emits gases. But it also can potentially negatively impact the health of the communities because of the air, reducing air quality. And then also every landfill eventually will have leaks. And so even though they may put down a barrier and they give all kinds of assurances, but eventually it will leak and become a problem for the groundwater. And so people who are on wells will eventually have negative experiences. And so there are just so many reasons why a landfill in the middle of a community is a bad decision, not a good decision for that community as well. And so I just really appreciate the way that you have framed this and your very courageous stance on why it's so important to bring to the community thriving businesses, clean businesses that can help the community grow and expand and actually help the community be more community than less community together. So when we're talking about your position and this fight, what has it done for your faith and your values? Has it strengthened it? Has it shaken it? Has it caused you to ask new questions? Tell us a little bit more about the way that the AMMD and you and others have experienced this situation or this proposed landfill and your resistance to it.
The have three major tenets of my life that I've operated on since I was 17 years old, and marching downtown Petersburg to open up the facilities, sitting at lunch counters, waiting online at movie theaters. So they are love, justice, and truth.
Mm-hmm.
And that is my mode of operation. So when I tackle a problem such as this, I don't tackle it. I tackle it knowing that if I keep those three things front of mind, if I keep love, if I operate in love, if I operate in justice, if I operate in truth, that eventually those things will win. Why do I know that? Because those are of God. God is truth. God is a just God. God is a God of love. And so operating from that framework has worked for me for 61 years in this space. And so I don't have any fear. And because God, I have seen what God has done over the years, my strength is really strengthened. My faith is really strengthened because I know He will. And I just keep being obedient, and I keep loving, and I keep seeking justice, and eventually He slays the giants.
Well, now, thank you for that. Eventually, the giants are slayed.
They're going down.
They go down with faith, justice, and truth. I love that. Love, justice, and truth. I thank you so much for that. That's very powerful encouragement to those of us who are resisting fights around the state. And I hope that those who are hearing us today and listening to us will remember that those values are critically important to the work that we do, that they will keep us and help us to preserve our work. And also, even in the face of, unsurmountable barriers, that we can, in fact, continue to stay in the fight and stay in the struggle because of those values. So I'm so appreciative that they are those very same values that undergird your work. So almost at our 30-minute mark, or beyond our 30-minute mark, and I just want to kind of begin to wrap up our conversation today. And I want to say that it's been incredibly inspiring and educational, I think, for many. Because I just want to reiterate just that our framing is about how we get free, how we enjoy liberation. Juneteenth was all about the message that emancipation had come. Well, how do we actually live out that freedom in a way that gives our communities and our people the opportunity to actually thrive and to enjoy the benefits of liberation, the benefits of that freedom? And so, what do you say to other communities facing? This is our final question. What would you say to other communities facing similar fights? They may not be landfill fights. They may be resisting the pipelines or fossil fuel infrastructure. They may be resisting having their land taken for other reasons like eminent domain for other projects, or they are resisting natural gas fire plants like in Charles City or in Brown Grove, resisting a huge, imposition of a distribution center by Wegmans in the middle of their community. What do you say to them as they continue to face these kind of similar giants?
All of you need to become one voice. Different circumstances, different threats, but one voice. And to do that, we have to organize, we have to educate, and we cannot grow weary in well doing. You have to stay on the battlefield, and you have to be loud, because they have the bully pulpit by virtue of the fact they have the money, they have the access, and we have to keep knocking on doors, knocking down barriers by using truth, by uncovering truth, and then speaking it boldly, speaking it until somebody finally hears you. But I think it's that strength in numbers. I think it's really uncovering the truth about the motivation for a lot of these toxic and encroachments on our life and our history. Get active in policy making. Nothing's going to change if you don't beat the policy making drums. It's not going to change.
Yeah.
So you've got to let your voice be heard in places and demand access. Don't let people tell us that we can't have information that we need. No, just keep doing the FOIAs until you get the information you need. If it's 15, you do 15. But don't stop searching for information. Don't start researching. Do not stop fighting. Do get yourself in somebody's courthouse, somebody's legislative body, uh, church, wherever you need to be, go, be, and fight.
Thank you so much, Muriel. One last question. I know you have an ask for those who are listening. What is that ask? An action that you want them to take? What is that?
Army Corps of Engineers need to hear from us. And we were fortunate to be designated one of the 11 most endangered historic places in the country. And so with the National Trust, through the National Trust for Historic Preservation, they, in their article about Pine Grove, in that announcement, they have a link where you can comment, send your comments to the Army Corps of Engineers about the water quality, those kinds of things that the Army Corps of Engineers is, has to consider and evaluate. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes, so that's, and I think we are showing now the link for that. So we want to encourage anyone who's listening and who's concerned, who cares about what's happening in Cumberland County, but not only in Cumberland County, but this is one example of why it's so important for us to stay connected, stay in conversation, to learn about what's happening around us, and that we're all connected. The state is connected. So whatever happens to one community happens to us all. Muriel, I just want to thank you again so much for this conversation this afternoon. I'm just so excited that you were able to squeeze in time to have this conversation and for us to be able to share what's happening in Cumberland County and what's happening with Pine Grove and AMMD. And the work that you're doing, and because it highlights how important environmental justice is and why we do this work, why Virginia Interfaith Power and Life exists, is to encourage communities like yourself to do this work, to be supportive, to be a resource for you, not to do it in your place and not to speak in your place, but to help come alongside and help you do the work that is so critically important to you. And so thank you again for sharing environmental justice now with us today. We probably will have other opportunities to have conversations with you, as we have learned today that you're a wealth of resource and knowledge. And so thank you again, and we're going to sign off now.
Thank you.